You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hello, and welcome to another class of another session of our class entitled Exemplary Practices in Catholic Teaching and Learning. My name is Dr. Sebastian Mahfood, and I'm delighted to share with you a guest for today who will be speaking with us on religious education. Her name is Sister Angela Ann Zukowski. She is a sister of the Mission Helpers of the Sacred Heart. She is director of the Institute for Pastoral Initiatives, and she's professor in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Dayton. Sister Angela Ann wrote a book that influenced me greatly back when I was first starting in this work of online teaching and learning and sharing with faculty the use of appropriate technologies in their on-campus teaching and learning environments. The book is entitled The Gospel in Cyberspace, which she co-authored with Pierre Babin. Sister Angela Ann, welcome. It's a delight to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you all. Maybe your weather is like ours. It's a beautiful, cool day finally in Dayton, Ohio. Mission Helpers of the Sacred Heart. My community was founded about 30 years ago. It was primarily founded to teach Black children faith formation or religious education in Baltimore, Maryland, because the Black children were not allowed to go into Catholic schools. And so that was our primary mission. And so we were involved in catechesis, but we also did a lot of ministry, social ministry within the Black community. So, we had this rich tradition. But over the years, our ministries evolved into more catechetical work, and our sisters over the years had major contribution to the catechetical field, which is very exciting. So I'm really thrilled to be able to be with you and to share some ideas about Catholic religious education. And this is going to be, it's really a basic orientation. I wasn't really sure where everyone was coming from, but I'm hoping that what it will do is lay a foundation upon which further study could begin and open up some possible questions. I think it's just so important for us to have some kind of a historical context regarding the evolution of Catholic religious education in the church today. As I'm sure all of you feel the same way, I keep telling my students, please study church history. Understand where we've come from and how we arrived at where we are in order to be able to have quality discourses with one another and with those that we are called to serve. So I'm really happy to share some of these ideas with you. They evolve out of some of the undergraduate and graduate courses I teach in the School of Education, as well as in the College of Arts and Science Religious Studies Department. So with that, I know we have not a lot of time, so let me begin, and I'll stop now and then just so we could have some kind of a beginning conversation along the way, if that's what you'd like to do. I think, first of all, it's looking at, when I heard the title Catholic Religious Education, I thought, how do I want to put this? There are so many portals by which you could enter here. I wrote to some of my students and some of my colleagues around the country that I work with in different ways, saying, how would you approach the title of Catholic Religious Education in a short time? So some of the ideas were reinforced for me, which I'd like to share with you. So, we need to deal with what is Catholic religious education? To whom is it communicated? How is it communicated? What is the desired impact? And where are we today or in the immediate future? So I hope that we can travel through some of these questions in the short time we have together. First of all, it's looking at the term Catholic. Now, look for portals. How I think the term Catholic for me is defined, as I define it to my students, it's looking at, we find what that means by we look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church. We understand what happened during the Second Vatican Council and how it influenced the unfolding of Catholic Church history, our teachings in different ways. So it's taking the documents of Vatican II, which are beautiful documents, reflecting on that in light of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is refreshed, as we know, through history as well. But this is the newest Catechism of the Catholic Church. And then the more recent teachings of the Catholic Church coming out from the Vatican, or they would come out from Episcopal conferences or from the bishops. So when we talk about Catholic for me, it means looking at what are these primary resources that ground us in the word Catholic in our faith. The new directory for catechesis, which you see a picture of it here on your left, which I'm going to speak some time about. This new directory, which came out in the summer 2020, it presents the catechism as the Church's official and indispensable guide for catechesis. So we'll look at that word catechesis in this play on words. And as we look at the four pillars of the Church that are articulated within the Catechism, that becomes the grounding for our religious education, if we choose to use that word, of the profession of faith, the sacraments, the call of discipleship, and prayer. If you have had a chance to read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it's not exactly bedtime reading, but there's some beautiful, beautiful sections, and especially that fourth section on prayer and the reflection on the Our Father. I found it personally very, very helpful and supportive of my prayer life, and I encourage my students to do the same. So these are the fundamental dimensions of the Christian life and fundamental to what our religious education is about. Looking at the term religious education, now it depends on how we approach what it is that we do. Traditionally, the term religious education has meant formal teachings in a classroom learning environment, and the focus was on instruction or on content. So if that's how we look, that's one way of looking at religious education. Some of you may be familiar of the term CCD, the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine. In the early 20th century, the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine took form. Primarily, that was for teaching the catechism, so to speak, to children who were not in a Catholic school. But here again, it was a kind of formal teaching after school hours, on Saturdays or on Sundays, but it was a formal teaching. Gradually, the term catechesis came into our conversations, affected by the Second Vatican Council, which added not only the information, but talking about the formation. Not that formation was not included in religious education and CCD, but we begin to see a turn, an enrichment of that term. And more recently, we're seeing the relationship of evangelization as the umbrella, and catechesis fits within that umbrella. And we speak of it as a living faith or many dioceses across the United States. They have changed the title of their office. It could have been in the past the Office for Religious Education, then the Office of Catechesis, and many offices now are called the Office for Catechesis and the New Evangelization, or the Office for Evangelization and Catechesis. So those two ideas are coming together. And then I introduce I think a new term within maybe the past 20, 25 years, which has been picking up momentum. And I refer to it as classical religious education. And it is a movement where, particularly within Catholic schools, that when it comes to the teaching of the faith, or even within the whole Catholic school environment, they focus their formation on the classical church writings, the teachings of the fathers, the apostolic fathers, on the desert fathers, and it's looking at, and often in Latin, or teaching children to be able to read those documents as well in Latin. So that's a new shift that's taking place. So being aware that this movement has been occurring along the way. We can also see three separate movements in religious education, or catechesis. There is this Orthodox movement and orthodoxy focusing on curriculum and teachings, a devotional or devotion movement where the focus is on liturgy and the sacraments and spirituality. And then the third movement on social justice. It's on service and living the faith. So can be developed or is developed, depending on what publisher one is using for catechetical environments, depends upon that, and also depends upon what is the theology, ecclesiology, and the spirituality that is existing within the parish, what direction they might move. But we find that these are in play along the way. And within secondary schools, within Catholic schools, you also will find the same kind of shift. Now, what this does end up causing is that there's challenges facing Catholic polarization in all of this. That could be another conversation for another time, but I just bring it up because I encounter this a lot because I work with both Catholic schools as a consultant for faith formation, and I also work with parishes in selecting materials, resources that they may use within their catechetical program. And especially now under COVID-19, there's a whole new movement taking place. But these are the challenges, like they're looking at those three movements, whether it's orthodoxy, liturgy, or social justice, how they want to portray or present Catholic religious education today. I think we have to find a middle road. The colleagues that I associate with, we talk about this all the time. It's not this or that. There's a combination, but how do we bring about a middle road? This evolution of the term religious education to catechesis is key for us to understand. When we look at the Second Vatican Council was a call to write a kind of general directory for catechesis, general catechetical directory. And that came out in 1971, which began the whole movement to where we are today. And it was from the General Catechetical Directory that in the United States, the bishops in the United States wrote the National Catechetical Directory called Sharing the Light of Faith. In each instance, it is the General Directory from the Vatican, which covers the whole world, and within each Episcopal conference, they are encouraged to write their own directory, to put it in a cultural context. In 1997 was the second general directory for catechesis that came from the Vatican. Again, refreshing, new things have happened, new trends in education and our encounters with world issues, challenges to the faith. This document came out. And from that, again, the National Directory for Catechesis within the Catholic Church came out for the United States. Well, now in July 2020, the most recent directory for catechesis has just come out from the Vatican. It really, if you get a chance to take a copy of it and read it, it really is, it reads very beautifully in one sense. Whoever translated it into English, I thought did a beautiful job. But when you parallel the three directories from the Vatican side by side, you begin to see the growth in language, in context, in perspective, and desired impact. And that's what we want to focus on. So when we talk about religious education, I talk about it, that's what catechesis is today. Fundamental to all these directories is that the church speaks about 6 tasks of catechesis. So it goes to the question, what is it that we're all about? Well, we have 6 primary tasks. Again, where did the 6 tasks of catechesis come from? Well, they originated from John Paul II's his apostolic exhortation, Catechesis Tradendae, on catechesis in our time. He spoke about the 6 tasks of catechesis. That was then reflected in the general directory of this second general directory from the Vatican on catechesis. And then finally, we see those 6 tasks of catechesis referred or referenced again in the new directory for catechesis. Therefore, we see this continuity of the church indicating what is it that we do? What is it that we're all about? Who are we catechizing? What is our aim? What is our goal? And what is our desired outcome? I like to explain the 6 tasks of catechesis to my students by saying the first 4 deal with the content and that personal lived experience, that knowledge of the faith, understanding the sacramental life, moral formation, and learning how to pray. Again, those relate to the 4 pillars of the church that are contained within the catechism. And the last 2 tasks take that faith, that experience, and we take it into the world. and we live it in community, and we develop a missionary spirit, so that faith isn't only formation in the head, it's formation of the heart, the hands, the feet. It's the way we live. These need to be woven into all of our catechetical instruction in our faith formation. So when my students, I teach a course at UD, it's a 2-year program, an undergraduate program called the Forum for Young Catechetical Leaders. During this 2-year program, the students learn how to design a variety of lesson plans for a number of kinds of learning environments. And we use these 6 tests of catechesis as part of their grounding for their creating their lesson plans. Now, coming out of those documents, the church continues to be, it is enriched by ongoing documents that focus what religious education should mean and the direction we should go. The pastoral letter, Our Hearts Were Burning Within Us, came out from the United States Catholic Bishops' Conference in 2000. It was several years. In the Catholic Church, it takes many years to write anything. I think the new directory for catechesis took 6 years to write, and I think it had 12 drafts before it got to its final use. But Our Hearts Were Burning is a beautiful document that was written in 2000, totally to emphasize adult faith formation. I was part of the consulting team when this document was being written, and the original hope was that this was going to be a whole new movement, a whole new thrust in the Catholic Church to get adult faith formation as the essence of inspiring all the other forms of religious education or catechesis in the parish and to animate the church forward. It was strong at the beginning and it sort of dwindled out, but I think this is what often happens with church documents. There's an initial push and then it sort of fades out and doesn't continue to have the full impact. But we could talk about that because here at the Institute for Pastoral Initiatives, we've based a lot of our work on that document. But further along, the whole Right for Christian Initiation of Adults further enhanced Our Hearts Were Burning, and we see how that is active in our parish life as a form of religious education or faith formation. The Co-Workers in the Vineyard, the document that talks about different forms of lay leadership in the church and what is needed to form lay leaders in the church also refers to religious education or catechesis. And of course, the USCCB's recent guidelines on building intercultural competencies for ministers and those who are teaching, the document on creating a culture of encounter and best practices in shared parishes, all of these documents are enhancing and enriching how we perceive what Catholic education is about. So I'm going to go into a little bit about evangelization and catechesis as we see it today, but let me stop right there because I've been going right along. I just love this. I just love teaching all this or sharing ideas. Does this make sense to you folks? Is it helpful? Or well, if it's not helpful, I don't know what I can do with it, but.
Well, thank you, Sister Angela Ann. This is very helpful in terms of laying out the foundation upon which we can build. You know, these documents are useful tools. 2 of them we already use, but perhaps not as intentionally or as well as we could be using. Co-Workers in the Vineyard of the Lord, for instance, provides the foundation for our Master of Arts in Pastoral Studies program. And I've developed a course on building intercultural competencies for ministers. That was Father Alan Deck, who will be talking in this class some weeks from now, who brought a number of us into conversation at the USCCB in the spring of 2010, you know, for how this would look, you know, when it was completed. And those were very useful. This past decade has been very good decade for these kinds of conversations, especially as we prepare for this coming decade of the third millennium. Yeah. If anybody would like to say anything, you are muted, so be sure to unmute if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. And Sister Angela Ann, any moderation you would like to provide? Claire's the first up, and I'll go back on mute.
Well, just from my perspective as the library director, I really appreciate the approach of using the documents in a historic perspective. It really shows the growth and how the church, the popes, the curia, they build upon one another, and it's a continuity. So I really appreciate this approach very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I find this so important for my students to understand, because when they go into either a Catholic school or they go into a parish and they encounter someone who says, what you're teaching is radical, it's not connected with the life of the church, I want my students to be able to say, well, let me show you. Let me show you how this has evolved in the history of the church. And when they can do that, I feel my students are more competent, and I think they give more integrity to their own teaching. But no, thank you.
And in the class that I'm teaching right now, I'm Lisa Galino. The class that I'm teaching right now, Mission of Evangelization and Catechesis, I was able to actually use the newest document, which I like very much. And I've also, up until that point, I've also done a little history of the different documents as they unfold. And it is very rich, and you see the perspective continue to grow, and the clarity. As you mentioned, the different methods and modes, and the ardor, which is something new with the evangelization aspect, how you see it continue to grow within each of the documents. So I love doing the historical context of the documents.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, thank you. Let me just continue here, and I will stop again. So looking at this, looking at the document, the word encounter is the most commonly used term in the directory, and it appears 60 times in the new directory. So it talks about the encountering with Jesus Christ, encounters with the scriptures, with the larger community, encounters with others in the catechetical process, and encounters with the art of accompaniment. And so keeping this in mind, well, that's a Pope Francis word, especially because how do we deal with this whole concept of encounter? And the focus of the directory, the new directory for catechesis, I love the section, and Lisa, you might even comment on that. I think it invites us for the act of deciding for faith and giving of one's assent to faith. So that, it doesn't mean that we never did this in the past. It's just that the focus on it is really strong on helping us to have an encounter with Jesus Christ and to make that personal commitment in order to live it profoundly. And it goes on to talk about evangelization. It's not just transmitting doctrine, but it is about making Jesus Christ present and proclaiming him. And this sort of helps in a conversation or challenges conversations we may have, where one may perceive that it's only orthodoxy and only teaching the doctrine, which is primarily what religious education is all about. This is where we bring evangelization and catechesis, builds that bridge between formation and information. Embracing this new vision of the new directory for catechesis is, yes, it is the new catechetical guidelines for us. It is called to impact all the ministries within the church. This is a strong emphasis in the directory that we begin to see evangelization and catechesis are not separate silo moments of ministry within the church, but they're woven into every single ministry that we're engaged in. It calls for a design of new models of faith formation. It calls for new models of designs for digital catechesis. And I was particularly excited about this because of my own work in this whole year. So it's not only the digital catechesis, but the digital culture. And it looks at new ways for witnessing to the faith today. And for catechists are the implementers of this new vision and mission. So it embraces these elements that ask us to ask ourselves the question, then what does it mean by being a catechist? What does it mean being one who is engaged with the formation of catechists? Or if you prefer to use the term, and maybe that's another conversation, of religious education or catechesis. The point in the directory talks about the factors that influence this new catechesis or religious education. And we have the enculturation, the digital culture, new anthropological questions, recent church documents. Those factors are important, but what I would like to do is just say it, the points underneath that. new questions, excuse me, new questions challenging the world and the church. The Second Vatican Council, Gaudium Spes, opened that door for this conversation. And I believe in this document, it challenges us again in the field of catechesis. It asks us to witness of the living one's faith in a secularized society. It asks us to look carefully at this whole question of the sense of the sacred. Have we lost it? How do we reclaim it? And to look at, there are many people who have not had a personal encounter with Jesus Christ, and how do we, and some people have not found a support and accompaniment of within the Christian community. One thing regarding religious education or catechesis, again, however you want to use that, related to this PowerPoint, is that I have been one of the Institute for Pastoral Initiatives. We work with dioceses across the country. We have about 80 dioceses that we work with. And a number of the dioceses, almost all the dioceses use our courses for their formation of their Catholic school teachers in some form regarding faith formation. But one of the subject areas, and you folks are aware of it, the subject areas that are emerging is the need for having courses on faith and culture and faith and science. And those areas are, for example, I do believe the state of California, if it's still going to be there after all the fires, but the state of California, the Bishops' Conference, is now requiring all teachers, Catholic school teachers, and people, catechists and parishes, need to take courses or take a course related to faith and science, because of the questions that are being raised in both the Catholic schools and in the parishes regarding those tensions today. And related to that is the slide I had just shown a few minutes ago. It's, how do you witness one's faith in a secular world? How does STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math relate to the issue of faith? The loss of the sense of the sacred in our world today. So what is the content of religious faith formation? It's much different than it was, 25 or 30 years ago. And all of those that were engaged with faith formation need to be in tune with that. Let me stop there. Does that make sense?
Very much so. And I think this is part of when I spoke about the mounting clarity in which the church is taught, and it really is revealed in this particular, that idea of encounter, accompaniment, the digital culture. It was all in seed form, if you will, in the other documents, an intentional disciple, missionary discipleship. All of those things were definitely in seed form, and we often spoke of that, but now we have so much clearer the language, which is expressed so beautifully in this current document.
Yeah, Lisa, that's so important. I feel that in this document, there's a greater existential fit.
Absolutely.
People's lived experience to what the church is teaching.
Without doing away, I think it's really got the pendulum back in the middle, without doing away with the doctrine, the dogma, the head knowledge. It's head and heart and hands even.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Oh, it's always good to talk to somebody who's read the document or familiar with it. Makes me very happy. I think I might invite you to join. I have a couple of colleagues around the country that are discussing it. Maybe I'll invite you to join.
Oh, I would love that.
Like that. Yeah, I'll make that a point. Okay. So the other idea that's related to this catechesis, the process of missionary conversion. Pope Francis came out with that document on parish conversion, during the summer it came out. But the process of being a missionary in the world today is part of our catechetical mission. And and the document talks about, that catechesis therefore should do everything possible to make the church's teaching to contribute to a creation of a new culture. I love this enthusiasm that comes across in this document. But when I was speaking to my students on Saturday in class, we were talking about what does it mean to be a faith catechist, to be engaged with creation of a new culture. And they just explored that with so much passion and enthusiasm that it really took it to a whole nother level. And here again, just as Lisa was talking about, and I confirmed that it's all about becoming experts in the art of accompaniment and in humanity. I'm showing you here some pictures. I also, for the past 25 years, the Institute, we've been working in the Caribbean with the Antilles Episcopal Conference of Bishops. I co-direct the Caribbean School for Catholic Communications, and these are some of our people that come to our school or participate. But being able to accompany people from whatever cultural context they are in is part of this new mission. This slide relates to what we were just talking about before, that there's this distance between faith and culture, that we need new categories, new languages, new modalities for our faith today. And there was a book that came out from, is it Barno Publishing? That maybe some of you are familiar with it. It's research that deals with how do people feel about talking about their faith, entering into conversations or dialogues with their faith. And
Barna Publishing.
Pardon?
Yeah, Barna Publishing, yes.
Right. And that really was it's a very interesting book, isn't it? I mean, it's research. And people do have, even at the university, some students will tell me that they really don't know how to talk about their faith or how to share their faith. And if they they decide to share their faith, it's how others perceive how they're sharing it. Or, sometimes they feel that, well, are you just being proud because you want to share your faith? And are you putting me down because you're sharing it? We have these kind of questions that go on. But students want to learn how to use the right language to communicate faith that builds bridges and doesn't create polarization. And this document encourages us to move in that direction. And the document talks about that, we need to present our doctrine that has an existential fit in a language that people understand. And 3 years ago, in one of my classes, a student was reading one of Pope Francis's writings, and he said to me, sister, why I like Pope Francis, he speaks in people language. I understand it, it's not a lot of theological jargon, but he came to appreciate that. And I think that's what we want to do here. So it's not just about how we teach faith, but it's also all about how we form people that we're preparing to teach the faith with. The term charismatic catechesis is expressed strongly through the document. One group that I was giving an address to, they said, "This is a wonderful word, charismatic. Where did it come from?" I said, "Well, if you've been around long a time, we use this term charismatic a long time ago in catechism. It's sort of coming back into existence, which is very beautiful. But it's that experiencing the presence of God in our life, and that Christianity is not simply of the past. Christianity is not a religion of the past, but it's an event of the present. And the act of freedom, the act of faith, it weaves itself in. So our catechesis, our religious education is how do we inspire, how do we animate, how do we tease out that encounter that it really is an act of freedom to embrace Jesus Christ and make it part of their life. Catechesis in Catholic schools and parishes, we're seeing that evolve in so many different ways today. And I want to, we might just talk a little bit about that in some question and answer period. Excuse me, I'm going to go back here. The pandemic's influence on faith is impacting our remote faith formation with various modes of learning as we have this encounter. I mean, just like ourselves here on Zoom. I have to share with you this middle picture. This is my niece who is 5 years old, and she's just had her first day in kindergarten in school. And she's remotely at home studying. And my niece, her mother, said to me, "You know what? School started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and already at 7 o'clock in the morning, she was down in front of her computer, turning it on, linking, turning on booting up her computer, linking into the course, and ready to go. And her mother took this picture. I mean, I told my students in class last week, I hope that's how eager they are to come into my classes every day, as eager as that. But we have these different modalities of teaching and learning now that are emerging in religious education. I have some concerns right now regarding parish religious education or faith formation, because our catechists do not know how to enter into this era of COVID-19. They don't know how to engage in catechesis in this time. I know that because in our Forum for Young Catechetical Leaders, one semester they're in class, the next semester they're in a parish. Next semester they're in class, the next semester they're in a parish. And so I was reaching out to the parishes where they would do their praxis. And I just discovered that the parishes didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know what to do under the pandemic. So what many of them were doing is they were pulling people together through Zoom for like about 15 minutes of prayer. And then they sent e-copies of activities for the children to work with, or children to work at home with their parents, which is really great. It's really moving towards a family catechesis, working with the domestic church. But if the parents have not been prepared with their own faith and even know how to deal with the exercises that are there, it doesn't really, it helps. I don't want to say it doesn't help, but we're in this tension. So I'm finding that right now we need to find new ways of catechesis in this digital culture. And the new directory brings that out. We don't have a lot of references how to do that. Publishers have a lot of resources for what you might be able to do. I have a grad assistant who's developing a PowerPoint on what are some of those resources to give to my students in my other class. So I don't know, Lisa, if you're interested in that PowerPoint when it's finished, I'd be happy to share that with you.
Thank you.
But it's a PowerPoint where the students can also go in and click on and immediately go to the different publishers and to find out what the resources are. So as they go to develop their lesson plans, they have those resources handy. But we still don't have the methodologies, creative methodologies for this time. In Catholic schools, it's not that big of an issue. You have teachers who are doing this through all the other subjects they're teaching. They have the technology. Their students have the technology, so they're being very creative and very innovative in those directions. In my class on the Forum for Young Catechetical Leaders, I'm bringing in the Catholic school teachers by way of Zoom, and they're sharing how they are teaching remotely using some creative activities and exercises, but real engagement. And it's been very, very informative for my students as well here at the UD. But that question about the parishes does really concern me. We're just entering that conversation, I think, around the world. But we need some Imagineers. Like Disney World has the Imagineers. We need religious Imagineers to begin thinking outside the box. So that's okay. I have one or two slides left here. Related to that, so I'll just do a little here, which we come back to. So the Institute for Pastoral Initiatives, one of our primary focus areas is our virtual learning community for faith formation, which we started over 20 years ago. The research started 25 years ago in 1995, which is offered in English, Spanish, and now in Arabic. We have 138 courses up. We have 175 facilitators around the world in the various languages. We have 7,000 adult participants per year in 7 cycles. And here again, if we're looking at adult faith formation, religious education, I've seen such a wonderful, beautiful growth over all these 20 years of people eager to go online and use the new technologies to grow in their faith. This kind of encounter like we have now, I can't say it's more personal because it's just still like to have that personal encounter with one another, but it's fitting into people's time frame of life. With work and family and everything else that goes on, they're finding adult faith formation remotely, online learning is being very effective. And we could talk about that. I've got lots of years of experience on that. So that's my presentation for today. I sort of took you through this portal of a little bit of the history, a little bit about the directory. I do believe the challenges are exciting today. I wish I were younger and be part of this pioneering age. But what I can do is I can be an animator, a supporter of my students who are the future leaders, and inspire them with the passion to be innovative, to use their imaginations, and to think outside the box for this new time in history. Because that's what really is going to make the difference. And it's going to challenge our parishes for new ways of being parish. The church cannot be a parish the way it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago anymore. We know the pandemic has already created a reality that it can't put it back in the box. It's out of the box. And how we are going to be reaching out to the parishes, to the people in our parishes, we need some new, fresh animation and imagination. And enthusiasm in our liturgies, our devotions, and our outreach, and all of that. And all of that's part of religious education. That encounter with Jesus Christ, being missionary disciples, and knowing one's faith, not just knowing one faith to know the faith. Like, maybe if some of you are as old as, or near my age or something, maybe when you were growing up, you were like me and we learned the Baltimore Catechism. And we had to learn the question and answers of all 287 questions. And you had to be prepared when the bishop went up and down the aisle and was asking the questions, and the whole parish was there. And God forbid if you missed the answer to the question. Your parents would be very embarrassed if you didn't know the answer to the question. But that's not so much the main part of it. It's the encounter with Jesus Christ. Because if you have that encounter, you will want to learn more. You will engage in that. And that's what I hope that we're all about. Engagement, encounter, engagement, art of accompaniment, and nurturing that beautiful spirit and that love of Jesus and being a missionary in the 21st century. Amen.
Sister Angela Ann, that was a beautiful presentation, and we have time for questions. I'd like to invite anybody to ask. So go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
I'm out here actually in Ventura County, California, and Bishop Robert Barron's our bishop, and so he's a very big supporter of religious education, evangelization, and the catechists are very they're good, they're very dedicated, but I wonder about continuing education for catechists, because it seems like once you go through and get certified, there seems to be there's more to learn. And so what kind of should be done or is being done in continuing education for catechists?
No, and I agree with you 100%. A lot's going to depend upon how a diocese supports that and encourages that within dioceses. So for example, with our virtual learning community for faith formation, the dioceses are encouraging their catechists that every year they should take at least one course. Not just a workshop, but a course to keep themselves alive and dynamic. Or some of our partner dioceses have all of their Catholic school teachers, in order to have their certificate renewed for the next year, have to take an adult faith formation course, whether they take it from us or whether they take it something offered in the parish, but a lot of them take it from us because but I do think that that's very important. Related to the same thing is RCIA. We have a good number of people who come to us from the RCIA, after the RCIA, because they said the parish invested time to prepare them through the mystagogy of RCIA, and then they don't do anything with them afterwards. And they're just hanging there.
That's huge.
Yeah. And then when they come into our courses, we find that they're not always well-rounded and grounded. And we end up doing some RCIA work within the courses because they haven't had that clarity. So I agree 100%. So if a diocese has a certification process that they implement and reinforce somehow, that say, in order to continue to be a catechist, every 2 years you have to take at least one course. or they make available the workshops and seminars that are available to catechists. That's what I think the digital culture is wonderful for this, because they can't make up too many excuses why they couldn't show up. Because you're making it, you can do this 5 different ways, 10 different ways. I agree with you very much. If our faith is a living thing, I talk to my students about being a vocation of a catechist. A vocation of a catechist is not just you go in and you're a warm body in a classroom. Still, too often in our parishes, they're warm bodies in a catechetical environment. I say they're without any preparation, more or less any continuing preparation. But if it's your vocation, you want to constantly be refreshed and learn more. Several years ago, we had a conference, and some catechists from the Samoa American Islands came to the workshop, to the conference we had. Those men came in, and they walked into a room. Of course, they have a commanding presence from American Samoa. But when they came in, the first thing when somebody said, "Oh, who are you?" the first thing they said is, "I am a catechist." Their first word is, "I am a catechist." And that kind of enthusiasm of their vocation, that makes all the difference. I say that to my students. I said, the first thing when somebody say, "Who are you?" you say, "I am a catechist." And you're excited about it. And I need to be refreshed. I need to constantly grow in that. I need to be nourished in that. So yes, I agree 100%. But dioceses that place it into their certification program and implement it is where it works most.
My experience of it is that I've worked in both diocesan and parish life, and I've found that whenever we give, they might come grumbling to the class at first, that they need to take these courses or they need to apply for this certification, but retention rate of catechists always skyrocket, because once they know the material and they themselves are evangelized and catechized, oftentimes it's the growing of becoming intentional disciples. We may not always, in the parish life, they may not necessarily have the they sign up because their child's going through the program. So, okay, Father got up there and said, "We need your help." But if we really help to form, it's very clear they themselves become intentional disciples, and then they end up staying and really enjoy being a catechist. So it helps. This formation is so important.
No, I agree with you 100%. The other issue is in our catechetical programs, do we make room for young catechists with all their enthusiasm? In some instances, they have young people who take it over because nobody else wants to do it. And in some situations, people have been catechists for their whole life and several lifetimes and don't want to give it up. And you have those kind of tensions also that are emerging. But yeah.
We helped parishes form an apprenticeship program to work with their confirmation students and make them little apprentices in the mission of catechesis. And, and they ended up, that was part of their service. And by helping them, they were learning the faith, and we would supply. And sure enough, after college, so many of them had come back to help out. It helped their own faith as well. And of course, we would put them with the people who had gone through the certification program and were these intentional disciples.
Well, and then there's some dioceses that have certification processes and the parishes don't pay any attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't help either. And sometimes I get a little, I know the Bishops Conference, the OCCB, is working on some new guidelines for those who minister in campus ministry, a certification process there. And there's another certificate they're working on designing. It probably will take a couple years to unfold. But here again, if we can say that there's a certificate program out there and you're required, but if it's not implemented at the local level, you don't have any, we just miss out. And so in the meantime, I'm saying we don't have time to wait for a certificate program to come out. The time is now. And we've already been told that the USCCB is not planning anytime too soon to write a new national directory for catechesis. So, so this book is going to be our primary guide. And it's a beautiful book, and the read of that book to get some enthusiasm around it. And it's for that reason I've been trying to bring together people nationally to let's just talk about it. How do we bring this to life? And how can we revitalize what it means to be a catechist? A couple of the dioceses that are partners with us when they before COVID-19, when people finish every one of our certificate courses, they get a hard certificate, and if they really do well, they get a gold ribbon on it. You know how hard people work to get that gold ribbon on their certificate? That means they are distinguished. And once they get a gold ribbon, they want to have a gold ribbon all the time. But what happens in several of the dioceses, when the bishop meets with the catechists or the Catholic school teachers, he hands out those certificates to them in a formal way. That has inspired other catechists to think about taking courses as well. Yeah.
I know in the few parishes I've been in, finding enough catechists is enough of a problem to even just meet that once a week. I can't imagine if they found out they had to do extracurricular certification. I don't know who they would get. I know I'm on an RCIA team right now, and two of us have definitely done our own growth in our faith over the years and are, knowledgeable enough. But two of them that have joined us we have to watch what they're going to say and how they're going to say it, because they're so poorly formed. And it's the reality.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to those 2 points that I brought up on one slide that's referenced in the new directory, where so many of our Catholics have not had an encounter with Jesus Christ, nor have they had a supportive community, faith community, to nurture them into that encounter with Jesus Christ. The parish has been a stop-off place for the sacraments. You go and you get your basic sacraments. As soon as you're confirmed, you're finished, without having that ongoing faith formation. We probably are, the church is guilty herself for not implementing a lifelong learning process early on, but at least we're here now for that. The students that I have at the University of Dayton that I have in my classes. So I teach the courses in pastoral theology and pastoral ministry. And so I have really select students that come into my classes. It's the same, I'm sure, with you folks in the college or in the seminary. So they're enthused. When they graduate, I know they're going to be going in their parish. They're going to continue ongoing formation. They're going to be active in their parish life. Where I feel sad is when they go back to a parish and then the pastor tells them, well, we really don't need you now. And that doesn't give them a lot of confidence about where the church is. So our parishes, that's why I'm glad that Pope Francis came out with that statement on parish conversion. We need to have parish conversion and a new way of being parish. And under COVID-19, people don't know what that would look like, but that doesn't mean we can't. That's why I wish I were younger, to get some energy up.
Well, you have a great deal of energy, Sister Angela Ann.
Thanks.
I do have one question. We at Holy Apostles provide a Master of Arts in Theology degree and a Master of Arts in Pastoral Studies. We also have a Bachelor of Arts in Theology. So we are preparing people to know their faith better. To what extent would you say we could do more for preparation specifically in catechetics to help people teach their faith to others?
Well, that's a huge question. I think looking at the directory and studying it well is one step. But I do think looking at different modalities of communication in the parish and the church. There are so many new ways that we can communicate. not in the traditional, but in many ways, we're not even using well all the new means of communication that are available to us as church. I mean, they're pretty traditional. I mean, we could be doing more with websites, the parish websites. I mean, some of them are dead websites. And some of them are very dynamic, but some of them are just, there's not much happening there. But I don't think we've used social media or other forms of media to the full extent that we can. But going back to the idea about the vocation of a catechist, the vocation of ministers, if we can find a way to enliven that with some passion, I think that's a great beginning. I teach an honors course for the Chaminade scholars called Vocation in the Arts, and I love that course also. It's looking that every discipline has a vocation, and every discipline is an art form, and how we can explore that. And that reminds me that another beautiful section of the new directory is the section on beauty but that's in there, and I love it. That whole sense of beauty, and Bishop Barron talks a lot about beauty himself, about the transcendental truth, goodness, and beauty, and how beauty is important to us. But I think that's where it's beginning. I think looking for encouraging thinking outside the box, brainstorming, having seminars of taking an idea and walking all around it with religious imagination of what are all the different possibilities of how a particular concept could be integrated, addressed, taught, imagined in parishes. So instead of just giving simple models, I often believe that the Catholic Church suffers from programitis. A program comes up and everybody jumps on the program because that's going to save us. And then we implement it and then it's over with and then everything quiets down until somebody comes up with a new program and everybody gets excited about it. I call it programitis. But we shouldn't go from program to program. We should have our parishes and those that are serving or preparing for ministry should have at the tips of their fingers those skills that inspire them to constantly be innovators and to be imagineers of faith in the contemporary world.
We have another minute only, and this time has passed way too quickly, Sister Angela Ann. Does anybody have a last-minute comment or a last-minute observation? Sister Angela Ann, anything summary that you'd like to say?
No, it's great meeting all of you, seeing you. I saw you the last time at the last lecture, and thank you for hanging in there. And if there's any way that you want to continue to talk about any of these concepts or share any ideas, I'm here to support you, and I'll keep you all in my prayers. As you see behind me, I have my icon of Our Lady of Częstochowa. Since I'm from Poland, my family's from Poland, and she's lit there all the time. So I'll keep you all in my prayers, and that all goes well with you and your families and friends during these COVID-19 times.
Well, let's conclude with that then. And it's my thought, my apologies for not having begun us in prayer, but we can conclude in prayer. Would somebody like to lead us in a closing prayer?
I'll jump in. Go, Lisa. Lisa, you go.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, we thank you for this time together which we ask you to inflame our heart, to inspire us, to increase our zeal, that we may continue to be witnesses of a living encounter with Christ, and that may spark that interest in others. And we pray for all of our catechists. We thank them for coming forward, but may they recognize and may they be awakened to the rich encounter with Christ and how that transforms their lives. Amen.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.